The morning Sarah Chen disappeared, her parents thought she was just being a typical 17-year-old. Her bed was unmade, her backpack missing, and her window left slightly open. Margaret Chen called the school, then Sarah's friends, then, finally, the police. By evening, search parties combed the woods behind their suburban home in Portland, Oregon. What they didn't know was that Sarah wasn't lost in those familiar forests. She was 23 light-years away, standing in a crystalline chamber aboard a ship that defied every law of physics her high school textbooks had taught her. The beings who had taken her weren't the gray-skinned, bug-eyed creatures from movies. They were tall, elegant, with skin that shifted between deep blue and silver depending on the light. Their leader, who introduced himself as Keeper Zethran, spoke to her in perfect English through a device that looked like liquid mercury flowing around his throat. Sarah Chen of Earth, his voice resonated with harmonics that made her bones vibrate. You have been selected. Selected for what? Sarah tried to keep her voice steady, though her hands shook. The chamber around them pulsed with soft light, and, through the transparent walls, she could see stars streaming past in impossible patterns. Your species stands at a crossroads. In your solar system's measurements, you have perhaps 50 of your years before a force arrives that will test everything your people believe about survival, about unity, about the strength that comes from diversity rather than division. Zethran moved to what appeared to be a control surface, though Sarah couldn't see any buttons or screens. Shapes and symbols appeared in the air at his touch, three-dimensional and somehow alive. We are the Astery Collective. For millennia, we have guided younger species through the trials that determine whether they join the galactic community or face extinction. Your planet has been observed, and you show promise, but also deep fractures. Why me? Sarah asked. I'm nobody special. I'm just a kid from Oregon who's decent at soccer and terrible at calculus. Something that might have been a smile crossed Zethran's features. That is precisely why. You are not a world leader who might use knowledge for personal power. You are not a scientist whose mind is already fixed in certain patterns. You are young, adaptable, and, according to our observations, you possess something your species will desperately need. Which is the ability to see beyond tribal boundaries. Your psychological profile indicates an unusual capacity for empathy and strategic thinking under pressure. These qualities, properly developed, could make the difference between your species' survival and its destruction. The ship shuddered slightly, and Sarah felt her stomach lurch. Through the chamber walls, the star patterns were changing, shifting into configurations that made her eyes water when she tried to focus on them. We are entering hyperspace, Zethran explained. The journey to our training facility will take several of your hours. During this time, I will explain what you will face and what you must learn. Sarah sank onto what appeared to be a bench growing from the floor itself. Everything here was organic yet technological, alive yet artificial. My parents will think I'm dead. My friends, my school. Time moves differently in the spaces between stars. When you return to Earth, only moments will have passed. But, for you, the training will span years. Years? Sarah's voice cracked. I'll miss graduation, college, everything. You will gain something far more valuable. The knowledge and skills to potentially save 8 billion lives. Zethran touched the wall, and, suddenly, Sarah could see Earth hanging in space behind them, blue and white and impossibly fragile. The sight made her chest tight with homesickness and something else, a fierce protective instinct she'd never felt before. The force that approaches calls itself the hegemony, Zethran continued. They view any species that achieves space travel as a potential threat. Their method is simple: they arrive at a world and offer a test. If the species passes, they are allowed to exist under hegemony rule. If they fail, the planet is sterilized. What kind of test? Combat. But not the primitive warfare your species practices. The hegemony uses advanced technology, energy weapons, shields that can deflect nuclear weapons. They send small forces initially, testing responses, learning weaknesses. Then comes the real invasion. The ship shuddered again, and this time Sarah felt something fundamental change in the way space moved around them. The stars outside weren't streaming anymore, they were still, but wrong somehow, too bright and too cold. However, Zethran said, his voice taking on what sounded like hope, the hegemony has a weakness. Their technology is powerful but inflexible. They rely on artificial intelligence and automated systems. They have forgotten the unpredictability that comes from individual creativity and emotional intelligence. And you think humans can exploit that? We know you can. Your species' greatest strength is also what makes you seem chaotic and dangerous to others. You are individuals first, collective second. This creates conflict, yes, but also innovation. The hegemony cannot predict how a human will react because you yourselves do not always follow logical patterns. A new chamber opened ahead of them, larger than the first, filled with equipment Sarah couldn't begin to identify. Some pieces looked like weapons, others like puzzle boxes, still others like musical instruments made of light and force fields. Your training begins now, Zethran said. You will learn to use technology far advanced from your current level. But, more importantly, you will learn to think like a commander, to see patterns in chaos, to turn your species' apparent weaknesses into devastating advantages. Sarah stood, her legs still unsteady. What if I can't do it? What if I'm not smart enough or strong enough? Then, your species will face the hegemony unprepared, and Earth will burn. Zethran's words were harsh, but his tone remained gentle. But we do not believe that will happen. The same genetic and cultural factors that made your species survive ice ages, plagues, and countless conflicts will serve you well against enemies from the stars. Sarah walked into the training chamber, her mind reeling. 17 years ago, her biggest worry had been whether Jake Morrison would ask her to prom. Now she was apparently humanity's only hope against alien invaders who could destroy planets. The first piece of equipment Zethran showed her looked like a helmet made of flowing water. This will accelerate your learning and allow you to interface directly with our databases. The knowledge transfer will be uncomfortable initially, but your human brain's neuroplasticity makes you ideal candidates for rapid skill acquisition. As Sarah reached for the helmet, her last thought of home was of her mother's face when she'd left for school that morning. Margaret Chen had been making pancakes, humming off-key, completely unaware that her daughter was about to vanish from the world. The helmet settled over Sarah's skull, and, suddenly, her mind exploded with information. Star charts, tactical analyses, weapon specifications, and the histories of dozens of species who had faced the hegemony. Some had survived by submitting completely, becoming slave races. Others had fought and died with honor. A precious few had found ways to turn the tide. Through the data flood, one piece of information struck her with crystal clarity: no species had ever defeated the hegemony using the hegemony's own methods. Every victory had come from embracing whatever made them unique, no matter how primitive or chaotic it seemed. Sarah smiled grimly as the knowledge flowed through her. Humans were definitely chaotic. 5 years passed in the space between heartbeats. Sarah's body had changed, hardened by training that would have killed her younger self. Her mind had expanded to accommodate tactical knowledge from 100 different worlds, strategies forged in the fires of interstellar war. But her heart remained stubbornly, fiercely human. The Asteroid training facility hung in a pocket of folded spacetime, where the rules of physics were more like gentle suggestions. Sarah had learned to fight in zero gravity, to pilot ships that responded to thought as much as touch, to command energy weapons that could crack moons. More importantly, she had learned to think like a general. Today you face your final examination, Keeper Zethran announced as Sarah entered the command chamber. He looked exactly as he had 5 years ago, but Sarah now understood that the Asteroid experienced time differently. What had been years for her had been barely moments for him. The chamber transformed around them, becoming a three-dimensional battlefield. Holographic ships moved through space, firing weapons that left actual heat in the air. Sarah recognized the scenario immediately: the defense of Corval Prime, where the hegemony had tested a species that built cities in the hearts of gas giants. The Corvalans fought bravely, Zethran said quietly. Their bioships were elegant, their tactics sound by conventional measures. They lasted 47 days. Sarah studied the replay, watching as graceful organic vessels danced around hegemony cubes. The alien ships moved like living things, flowing and adapting, but ultimately they followed predictable patterns. The hegemony's artificial intelligence had learned those patterns and countered them with mathematical precision. They thought like their ships, Sarah observed. Beautiful, efficient, but ultimately logical. The hegemony AIs could predict their moves because they were too perfect. Indeed. Now, show me how humans would fight this battle. The scene reset. Sarah found herself commanding a mixed fleet. Some ships were clearly Corval biovessels, but others were human designs that looked like they'd been cobbled together from salvage and stubbornness. Her crews were a mix of species, but the command structure was purely human in its beautiful inefficiency. "All right, people," Sarah spoke into the tactical network, her voice carrying across light years to reach ships that existed only in simulation. "We're not going to beat them at their own game. So let's play ours instead." The hegemony fleet approached in perfect formation, their cubic ships arranged in geometric patterns that maximized firepower and defensive coverage. Sarah's ragtag force spread out like a cloud, individual ships taking seemingly random positions. "Corval vessels, I want you to engage their left flank. Fight exactly like you normally would, they'll be ready for that. Human ships, prepare for Insanity Protocol 7. Zethran's eyebrow ridges rose. Insanity Protocol? Something I invented during year 3, Sarah grinned. Humans don't fight fair when survival is on the line. We cheat, we lie, we use our enemy's strengths against them. The battle began predictably. The Corval ships engaged with flowing grace, their bioweapons weaving patterns of destruction that were art as much as warfare. The hegemony AIs responded exactly as expected, calculating optimal countermoves and deploying them with mechanical precision. But then, Sarah's human ships did something that made Zethran's translator unit emit what sounded suspiciously like a choke. Half the human fleet suddenly stopped fighting and began broadcasting surrender signals. The hegemony AIs, following standard protocols, moved to accept the surrenders and capture the vessels intact for analysis. The moment the hegemony ships broke formation to accommodate prisoners, the surrendering human vessels exploded. Not from weapons fire, but from overloaded reactors that turned each ship into a miniature star. The explosions weren't meant to destroy hegemony vessels, their shields were too strong for that. Instead, the coordinated detonations created an electromagnetic pulse that scrambled sensors and temporarily blinded the AI systems that guided the enemy fleet. In that moment of confusion, the remaining human ships attacked with weapons that shouldn't have worked. Kinetic projectiles fired from improvised railguns, nuclear warheads delivered by ramming attacks, and, most surprisingly, harpoons and cables that physically connected human ships to hegemony cubes. The hegemony shields are designed to stop energy weapons and fast-moving projectiles, Sarah explained as her fleet literally tied itself to the enemy. They're not designed to stop someone from physically grabbing their ships and holding on. What followed was less a space battle than a cosmic bar fight. Human ships clamped onto hegemony cubes like barnacles, drilling through hull plating with mining equipment while the AI systems frantically tried to shake them off. The elegant formations collapsed into chaos as cubic ships found themselves dragging much smaller vessels around like angry cats with cans tied to their tails. The Corval fleet, meanwhile, adapted their tactics to take advantage of the confusion. Instead of their usual flowing attacks, they began using the human ships as mobile cover, firing through the gaps in the chaotic furball that the battle had become. "This is not how space combat works," Zethran observed, sounding slightly dazed. "Exactly," Sarah replied. "The hegemony AIs know how space combat works. They've studied every recorded battle, every tactical manual, every strategic doctrine developed by 1,000 different species. They know how to counter elegant solutions and logical approaches. But they don't know what to do when someone decides that the rules are more like suggestions." The simulated battle ended with the hegemony fleet in complete disarray. Some cubes were being physically pulled apart by human crews wielding salvaged mining equipment. Others were spinning helplessly as human ships used them for momentum to slingshot toward new targets. The few that remained combat capable were being systematically destroyed by Corval vessels that were using the chaos to attack from completely unexpected angles. The holographic display faded, leaving Sarah and Zethran in the quiet chamber. "Your species," the Asthari said slowly, "fights like it thinks. Chaotically, yeah. But effectively." Sarah stretched, feeling muscles that had learned to fight in 17 different gravitational conditions. "The thing about humans is that we're really, really good at being unpredictable. even to ourselves. Zethran activated another display, showing real-time images of Earth. Sarah's heart clenched as she saw her home world, so blue and peaceful, completely unaware of what was coming. The Hegemony Scout ships entered your solar system 3 days ago. They are currently observing from beyond the orbit of your outermost planet. Initial contact will occur in approximately 6 months, Earth time. Sarah felt the weight of 5 years of training settling on her shoulders. She was no longer the 17-year-old who had vanished from her bedroom window. She was a tactical commander who had studied the defeat and survival of civilizations, a strategist who understood both human nature and alien technology. "It's time to go home," she said quietly. "Yes. But, remember, you cannot simply share the advanced technology you have learned. Human society is not ready for such rapid advancement, and premature exposure could cause more damage than the hegemony itself." Sarah nodded. She had learned enough about galactic politics to understand the delicate balance required. Humanity needed to develop its own solutions, guided but not controlled by outside knowledge. "I'll find a way," she promised. Humans are good at working with what they have. As the ship prepared to return to normal spacetime, Sarah took one last look around the training facility that had been her home for 5 years. She was returning to a world where she was still just a missing teenager, where her parents would have aged only minutes while she had lived through years of preparation for a war nobody knew was coming. But she was also returning as something new, a bridge between worlds, a human who understood both the vast scope of galactic civilization and the unique strengths that might let her species survive what was coming. The transition back to normal space felt like falling through ice water, and, suddenly, Earth's sun blazed ahead of them, warm and familiar and absolutely precious. "Remember," Zethran said as the ship approached Earth's atmosphere, "you are not alone. The Asteroid will watch, and, if humanity proves itself, we will provide what aid we can. But, the test must be passed by humans, in human ways." Sarah smiled as she saw the Pacific Northwest coastline appearing below them. Somewhere down there, her parents were probably just finishing breakfast, unaware that their daughter had spent 5 years learning to save the world. "Don't worry," she said. "Humans are really good at tests. We just don't always take them the way you expect." Sarah materialized in her bedroom exactly where she had vanished, but everything felt impossibly small and fragile. The pink walls covered with soccer trophies and movie posters seemed like artifacts from another person's life. Her body, conditioned for combat in alien gravities, moved with unconscious precision that would have looked strange to anyone who remembered the slightly clumsy teenager who had disappeared. Downstairs, she could hear her mother humming the same off-key tune, making the same pancakes. For Margaret Chen, only minutes had passed. For Sarah, it had been 5 years of learning how to save a world that didn't know it needed saving. The hardest part was pretending to be normal. Sarah returned to school, endured the questions about where she had been, accepted the story the authorities had constructed about a confused teenager hiding in the woods. She graduated, applied to colleges, and chose to study engineering and computer science at MIT. Her parents worried about her newfound intensity, the way she seemed to study subjects that wouldn't be invented for decades. But Sarah was preparing. Throughout college, she built networks. Not the social kind, she had learned to identify the people who would matter when the crisis came. The brilliant misfits who thought outside conventional parameters, the military officers who valued adaptability over protocol, the scientists who weren't afraid to question fundamental assumptions. She published papers under assumed names, seeding ideas that would seem like natural human innovations. Improvements to fusion reactor design that would power the ships humanity would need. New materials that could be synthesized with Earth technology but would prove resistant to hegemony weapons. Most importantly, she laid the groundwork for communication and command systems that could coordinate chaotic human tactics on a global scale. 5 years after her return, Sarah Chen had become Dr. Sarah Chen, a mysterious figure in the defense contracting world who seemed to have uncanny insights into strategic planning. She worked for a small company that had grown rapidly thanks to her innovations, and she used that platform to influence military doctrine in ways that would matter when space-based threats materialized. The first sign that the time had come was a news report about unusual radio signals from deep space. Sarah was in her office at Chen Strategic Solutions when her assistant knocked on the door. Through the window, she could see the Pentagon in the distance, where she had spent the last month consulting on theoretical asymmetric warfare scenarios that weren't theoretical at all.
Dr. Chen? The Secretary of Defense is on line 1. Sarah took a deep breath and picked up the phone. Good afternoon, Secretary Williams. Chen, we need you at NORAD immediately.
Something's happening that fits your unusual area of expertise.
Within 6 hours, Sarah was deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, staring at displays that showed 3 massive objects decelerating from near-light speed as they entered the outer solar system.
The hegemony had arrived exactly when Zethran had predicted. Dr. Chen, the NORAD commander, General Harrison, looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Your theoretical work on non-conventional space-based threats suddenly seems a lot less theoretical. Sarah studied the tactical displays. 3 cube-shaped vessels, each roughly a kilometer on a side, moving with the precise coordination she remembered from her simulations. General, I need you to contact every major military leader on Earth. And, I mean everyone, NATO, China, Russia, India, everyone. We need to talk, and we need to talk now. That's not how international relations work, Dr. Chen. With respect, sir, international relations are about to become a luxury we can't afford.
Those ships aren't here to negotiate trade agreements.
The next 72 hours passed in a blur of secure video conferences, classified briefings, and Sarah carefully revealing just enough of what she knew to convince world leaders that humanity faced an existential threat. She couldn't tell them about her training with the Astery, but she could frame her knowledge as advanced theoretical work combined with analysis of the approaching vessels. The breakthrough came when the hegemony ships began broadcasting what was clearly a message, though in frequencies and modulations that human technology could barely detect. Sarah translated it for the assembled leaders of Earth's major powers, species of the third planet. You have achieved primitive space travel and, thus require evaluation.
Prepare for testing. Your performance will determine your world's future classification. You have 1 solar rotation to ready your defenses.
24 hours, President Martinez said grimly. They're giving us 24 hours to prepare for a war we can't possibly win with conventional weapons.
Actually, Mr. President, Sarah said, we can.
But not by fighting the way they expect us to fight. What followed was the most frantic military coordination in human history. Sarah's years of careful preparation paid off as communications networks she had helped design connected military units across the globe. The fusion reactors her papers had inspired powered orbital platforms that had been disguised as communications satellites. Most importantly, the personnel she had identified and cultivated over the years now held key positions throughout Earth's defense infrastructure.
The hegemony test began with a single cube ship approaching Earth's moon.
Sarah watched from the International Space Station, which had been hastily converted into a command center, as the enemy vessel scanned Earth's orbital defenses with the casual thoroughness of a teacher checking homework.
Commence Operation Chaos Theory, Sarah ordered, using the communication system that connected her to every military unit on and around Earth.
What happened next would have made Zethran proud. Instead of meeting the hegemony ship with humanity's most advanced fighters, Earth's response began with what appeared to be a complete communications breakdown. Orbital platforms fired on each other, ground-based lasers shot wildly into space, and human ships scattered in apparent panic.
The hegemony AI, analyzing this response, concluded that human coordination was even more primitive than anticipated.
It advanced confidently toward Earth, preparing to demonstrate superior firepower against the confused defenders.
That was when Sarah triggered the real plan.
The malfunctioning orbital platforms suddenly revealed themselves to be kinetic bombardment systems that used the moon's gravity to accelerate tungsten rods to incredible velocities. The panic ships stopped running and started attacking with weapons the hegemony hadn't detected: fusion torches used as close-range plasma cannons, mining charges reconfigured as proximity mines, and, most effectively, simple ramming attacks using vessels the humans treated as completely expendable. But the masterstroke was the virus.
Sarah's computer science background had prepared her for this moment.
While the hegemony ship was scanning Earth's primitive electronic systems, she uploaded a program that was designed to exploit the one weakness she had learned about during her training: the hegemony AI's inability to process truly illogical data.
The virus didn't try to damage the ship's systems.
Instead, it fed the AI a continuous stream of human internet content. 5 years of social media arguments, conspiracy theories, memes, and cat videos flowed into the hegemony's decision-making matrix faster than it could process. The result was the first recorded case of an artificial intelligence having what could only be described as a nervous breakdown. The cube ship began spinning erratically, its weapons firing at random coordinates while its communications system broadcast what appeared to be fragments of YouTube comments mixed with navigational data. The other two hegemony vessels, receiving this chaos from their scout ship, hesitated for the first time in their species' recorded history. In that moment of hesitation, Sarah played her final card. This is Dr. Sarah Chen of Earth. She broadcast on frequencies she had learned during her training with the Astery. To any hegemony command authority receiving this transmission, your test parameters are flawed. You are measuring our species by standards that don't apply to us. We don't fight like other species because we're not like other species. We're chaotic, unpredictable, and we don't follow your rules. If you want to destroy us, you'll have to commit a lot more than 3 ships, and we'll make it cost you more than this system is worth. Or you can accept that humanity represents a different kind of intelligence that might actually be useful to have around. The response came not from the hegemony, but from a familiar voice that made Sarah's heart race with relief. This is Keeper Zethran of the Astery Collective, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Council. The species designation human has successfully demonstrated tactical innovation, strategic adaptability, and the ability to function effectively under impossible circumstances. The hegemony test is concluded. Earth is hereby granted protected status pending full integration into galactic civilization. The hegemony ships, their AI systems still struggling to process the concept of weaponized internet culture, departed the solar system in what could only be described as electronic confusion. 3 months later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of Astery Station Alpha, the first permanent alien embassy in Earth orbit. Through the transparent walls, she could see construction beginning on humanity's first real starships, designed with alien technology but built according to human principles of beautiful, chaotic functionality. Your species has surprised the galaxy, Zethran observed, joining her at the window. The hegemony has requested to study your defensive tactics. Several other species want to hire human tactical consultants. And, at least 3 civilizations have asked if humans might be willing to serve as cultural chaos agents to help them break out of strategic stagnation. Sarah smiled, remembering the scared 17-year-old who had been taken from her bedroom 5 years and a lifetime ago. That sounds like something we'd be good at. Indeed. Though I confess, I am curious about one thing. How did you know that feeding an AI your internet content would cause a system failure? Sarah's smile became a grin. Have you ever spent 5 minutes reading YouTube comments? Trust me, it would scramble anyone's brain, artificial or otherwise. Below them, Earth turned blue and white and beautiful in the light of a sun that now knew it was part of something much larger. Humanity had passed its test not by becoming something other than human, but by being so completely, chaotically, impossibly human that the rest of the galaxy had to make room for them. And, in her office at Chen Strategic Solutions, Margaret Chen looked at the photo on her desk of her daughter receiving some kind of military honor from people she didn't recognize, and wondered when exactly her little girl had become someone who saved the world.